feel personally.
All
right, so right now we've gone through the cells, so we started by talking about microscopes so that we can understand how to use them. Then we moved into cells, and the parts of the cells, what the different parts do. The last step for us is to move into some processes, some things that happen inside of cells that are important to know about.
Are we going to have a test on this entire mechanism?
No. We'll quiz on this last section, then we'll have our benchmarks.
On
All right, so the cell processes that we are going to be talking about here are called osmosis and diffusion, and photosynthesis and respiration. My guess is you've only heard of one of these. Is that correct? All right, so we're starting today with talking about diffusion and osmosis. So, before we can really start getting into these processes, we need to understand a little bit about solutions and strength of solutions and concentration and things like that. So we'll use this as an example. So you probably all have had some sort of Kool-Aid or lemonade that comes in a powder and you made it yourself.
Yeah.
So obviously if you made 2 glasses of Kool-Aid here, A and B, which is more concentrated for Kool-Aid? Evan? B, the darker one, the red one. How do you think you made that Kool-Aid versus making, what would you call A? Weaker, a more diluted version. And so A would have a lower concentration of Kool-Aid. Now, how would you make those? 2 glasses of Kool-Aid, right? Yeah, you put more powder in sample B and less powder in sample A. So you said there's a higher concentration of Kool-Aid in B. Where is there a higher concentration of water? Layla?
A.
In A. All right, let me ask you another question. What if I had just a glass of water? How would that compare to A?
It would be even more
More what?
water.
We have a higher
Water.
concentration of water. It would be if you had pure water, can you have any higher concentration than that? No. Okay. So if I were to imagine, you can't see the molecules in this case, and you look at a glass of Kool-Aid, you can see the color they impart on the water. Okay. But if you were to imagine the molecules of Kool-Aid in sample B, you would have more of them, a higher concentration of them. So yeah, just draw some. The number is not important. Just show that there's more of the Kool-Aid molecules on the right in sample B. All right. So some terms. Dilute. William used that word earlier. What does it mean? Okay. So like if this was too strong, you took us and you said, oh, this is too sweet. What would you do with it? Yeah, add more water. That would dilute the solution, and it would be less strong. Diluting means to add more water to a solution. So Kool-Aid is a solution. Salt water is a solution. Did you guys study mixtures and solutions back in elementary school? No? Okay.
All we do is do minerals, that's it.
All right, so a solution, you guys know what it is just by your own experiences, like we talked about, putting some salt in water. Salt seems to disappear, but it's not, it's still in there. You can taste that there's still salt in there, even if you can't see it. That's a solution. And a solution has 2 parts to it. The solute and the solvent. I don't know. So do you know what the solvent is? Which one? If you're making some Kool-Aid, Olympia? Yeah, the water is the solvent. The solute is the stuff you're adding. Okay? The solute is what gets dissolved. What seems to disappear. The solvent is what's holding it. So in Kool-Aid, the Kool-Aid is the solute, the water is the solvent. All right, so let's look at some more examples just to help us understand concentration. So I have some sugar water. Sugar dissolved in water. I have sample A and sample B. All right, raise your hand if you can tell me, what is the solute and what's the solvent in this example? Jack, the solute
Sugar?
and the solvent?
Water.
Yep.
Sugar.
Which has a higher concentration of sugar, Mitchell? And which has a higher concentration of water? Now I have some salt water. What is the solute in this next example, Emma? The salt. In the solute, or the solvent, sorry, Emma? It's water. Which has a higher concentration of salt? Meg? And a higher concentration of water? Now things change a little bit. Now I have some glucose in water. Glucose is a type of sugar. What's the solute? Jake?
The solute is the glucose?
The glucose. What's the solvent, Wyatt?
Water.
Yes. Which has a higher concentration of glucose? Danielle?
They both have the same, but wouldn't it be B because there's less water in it, so they're going to hold?
Okay, so let me ask the question again, because you sort of said yes, but then you kind of added on to your answer. Which has a higher concentration of glucose? Hold
They
on.
both have the same.
No.
Your second part of your explanation was right.
Oh, B.
Yes. So sample B, and explain that again, Danielle.
Because there's less water in it, so it can hold more molecules.
Yeah. So there's less water, which means there's a higher concentration of glucose. Imagine if you had a spoonful of salt. You had 2 spoonfuls of salt, equal amounts. You dissolved one in a small glass of water and tried to drink it. The other you put in a bucket of water. Okay, which one would taste saltier? Yeah, the small glass, because again, it's not just the amount of the solute that you're dissolving, it's also the amount of the solvent that determines the strength of a solution. So yes, A would have, even though they each have 6 molecules of glucose, B has a higher concentration because there's less water. A has a higher concentration of water. All right, let me ask you this. Could I easily make these equal concentrations?
Yes.
If you add the more water.
How much more water?
50 milliliters.
Yeah, if I add 50 milliliters of water to this one, then I would have equal concentration. All right, so concentration is very important when we start talking about this cell process of osmosis and diffusion. So, remind me about the cell membrane. We just had a quiz. What does the cell membrane do? Max?
It lets things go in and out of the cell.
Yeah, it allows things to move in and out. If things have to get in the cell, they have to somehow go through the cell membrane. Things need to leave the cell, they need to get through the cell membrane. So it's very thin and has special ways that we're not going to get into of allowing some things in and not other things, or allowing some things out but not other things.
Is that like protect like bacteria getting in?
Yeah, somewhat. So there's membranes, there's lots of types of membranes, not just the cell membrane. There's artificial membranes, they look like plastic. There's the cell membrane, nuclear membrane, and so forth. So when we talk about membranes, we have some terms that we use. We can say that a membrane is permeable to a substance. Can you imagine what that means, something is permeable? Caitlin?
It's like able to dissolve.
Well, close. Not able to dissolve, but it's able to get through. So if I say the cell membrane is permeable to water, what I'm saying is that water can pass through it. So you can probably guess what impermeable means. Okay?
Substances cannot.
Correct. So if a cell membrane is impermeable to a substance, that means that can't get through. So cell membranes are what we call semi-permeable. Anyone want to venture a guess as to what semi-permeable means?
Some things could be let into.
Exactly. It means that some things can pass through, other things cannot. The cell membrane is a semi-permeable membrane. So a cell membrane is actually pretty complex. It's made of this double layer of phospholipids. That's what these orange things are. 2 layers, and they have these tails that face in together. They have these proteins. They're kind of stuck in the membrane. Okay? And so some things can just go right through the cell membrane into the cell. Other things need sort of some help. They have to go through sort of a tunnel to allow them into the cell. Those are proteins that allow that to happen. So if some substances can sort of just go through, things like water, carbon dioxide, oxygen, they can just sort of pass through the cell membrane freely. It's almost like that membrane's not there. But other things are not like that. All right, let's think back to our Kool-Aid. Now I have a few more examples of Kool-Aid.
Wait, the second one? No, I think the second one.
So what is concentration? Now we know. You said, how can we define concentration? We're talking about the concentration of Kool-Aid or of water in these. So what is concentration? Caitlin?
Like how strong the taste is.
Yeah, the strength of a solution. That's a good way to say it. The strength of a solution. And if there's a higher concentration of Kool-Aid, so wait, on this side, what do we have here? Describe this glass of Kool-Aid.
More concentrated.
It has what, Maddie?
A higher concentration of water.
A high, this one?
No.
High concentration of,
Kool-Aid.
and a lower concentration of.
Water.
How about this one? Sophia?
Low concentration of Kool-Aid and high concentration of water.
Right. Which one do you like to drink?
I like the last one.
Wait, who says the last one? Nobody?
I'll do it.
Ugh, second to last?
I'll do it.
No.
I just
Middle?
The second to last.
One down? Anyone want to drink this one?
No, the second.
I'll do it.
I'll
take
the third.
I drink the main one if I really
Maybe a third.
All right. So, we are going to be talking a lot about molecules moving from one place to another. And we haven't talked about molecules really yet, but we will. A molecule is sort of what all matter is made out of. I was talking about a salt molecule, water molecule. So all matter is made out of what we call molecules. So this process called diffusion is when molecules move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. So this morning when I came in here, Mr. Arcuri was in the back room over here. He was kind of standing there weirdly.
Why?
And I came in this door. And so he goes, oh, hi, how you doing? So I just had chili last night for dinner. So as I walked in this door, all of a sudden, this stench started to make its way into my nose, and I was gagging. I had to leave the room. So that's an example of diffusion. Because when Mr. Arcuri was in the back of the room, doing whatever happened there, there was at first a high concentration of odor molecules, okay, back there. And because they were in a high concentration, they were bumping into each other. And as they did that, they gradually started to spread out throughout this room until I was over here, and some of them actually got into my nose and I could smell that stuff. So that is an example of diffusion. Those molecules were diffusing from a crowded area back in the corner to a less crowded area. That's what diffusion is. So, or perfume, for example, diffusing through the room. If I put a drop of dye in a container of water, would it just stay a tiny little droplet? No. What would happen?
The color would go all through the water.
Yeah, eventually
It would expand.
it would expand and the water would become blue. The molecules in that crowded area would spread out throughout the water. That process is called diffusion. I'll give you an analogy. If I were to take every 7th grade student in our school, I would say I could probably force them into this room. It'd be very crowded, be smelly, be sweaty.
Yeah.
But if I could do it, would that be a high concentration of 7th graders?
Yeah.
All right, let's say at first I had every 7th grader in here and I had all the doors closed. They're stuck in here. High concentration of smelly 7th graders.
I check out the window.
What would happen if then I opened up that back door into that small storeroom? Everyone would go in there? No, some people would go in there. And then what if I had a door here into Miss Morrow's room next door and I opened that?
Didn't run away.
Would everyone go in there? No, they would sort of spread out so you had a little bit more space. So that same concept, that's what diffusion is. Molecules don't like to be in a tiny crowded area. If they're given space, which they can spread out, they will do so. And that's what diffusion is. You are acting as molecules in that situation. So molecules are always moving, and sometimes they randomly bump into each other, and that causes them to sort of gradually spread out. That process is diffusion. Here we have a high concentration of molecules, and as time goes on, they spread out.
What is T1, T2?
That's just time, 1 and 2. Now we have another term called osmosis. Osmosis is diffusion, but it's a special case. It's when it's water that's moving, and it's moving across a membrane. So the diffusion of water across a membrane is our definition of osmosis. So let's see if we can imagine what would happen in this apparatus that I have shown on your slide. Tomorrow we'll be doing a few examples of osmosis and diffusion. But I have a plastic tube shaped like a U. It comes apart here at the base of the U, like you could separate it. And I put in that separated part a membrane, a semi-permeable membrane that allows molecules like water to pass through, but not larger molecules. So I get my apparatus all set. On this side, I put in some water with some molecules that can't make it through the membrane. Okay? And then on the other side, I put the same thing, same molecules, same water, but how does the concentration compare of these molecules? Right? Well, the water is just the blue. The purple are the molecules I dissolved. So where is there a higher concentration of water?
On the right side?
Nope.
Oh, on the left.
On the left. There's a higher concentration of those molecules on the right. So there's a higher concentration of water here, lower concentration of water there. Now what would these molecules like to do if they could?
Spread out.
But they're blocked, so they can't. What does the water want to do? Go from a higher concentration to a lower concentration. Can water get through this barrier? Yeah, I said in this case it can. So if you left this, this is what would happen.
Actually?
Yes. The water level on this side would rise higher, and this side would drop lower. So now, what do the concentrations look like? Relatively equal. Because water's gone. What we would say has happened is osmosis has happened. Water has diffused through this membrane, okay, equalizing the concentration. Now this also, well, I guess, let's see something.
Wait, did we have to answer what it would look like?
Let's pause that for right now. Kevin?
How do you get a different amount of water molecules?
So you start with equal amounts of water and you just dissolve more of the solute in there, and that changes the water concentration.
So what was the solid?
It was just a molecule that can't fit through. It could be starch or something like that. Okay? We'll use starch tomorrow as our example of a molecule that can't get through this semi-permeable membrane. But we'll pause there for now. Any questions? All right, got through a lot. Tomorrow we'll see some examples of osmosis and diffusion. Excuse me?
Subscribe to
Not just do Ross. There we go.